Hey, fourth grade, we're going to have a lesson over do you know your copyright laws? And once we're through with this, you are going to know them. You probably don't think it's an important thing to know, but it is. So let's take a look. Here are some important questions. What are your rights as a creator? Meaning, do you have rights when you create something? Can anybody take it, or are you protected? The second question we're going to look at is, are you giving credit for other people's work? Meaning, if they created something, are you borrowing it and taking it and claiming it as your own? Or are you saying, hey, this is so-and-so's and I love it, but I'm going to give them credit. So we need to think about this as we continue on. We will be able to define and explain the word copyright and how it applies to creative work. We will be able to describe our responsibilities. We are going to apply those copyright principles to real life scenarios. And if you still have questions, then come see me. We need to have a talk. The terms we need to learn: intellectual property, copyright, license, attribute, and plagiarism. Those are all very important terms. Did you know intellectual property is the ownership of something you create, which gives you the right to determine how others can use it, such as patents, domain names, inventions, logos, and trademarks. A patent, that is something you put on an invention. So if you created the light bulb, but say you used a different kind of wiring to make it extra special, and you created that wiring, you're going to put a patent on that wiring, just like Apple has done on some of their products. Domain names. What if you decided you were going to have your own little video game service and you were going to create video games and post it? Well, you needed to have a domain name. You're going to have to pay for that. Or what if you're some up-and-coming chef and you're going to post your recipes and your videos? Again, you have to have a domain name that you need to purchase because you may not want to use just good old YouTube. Inventions. Inventions. Inventions are the Apple iWatch, the light bulb, certain cooking utensils. Those are just inventions. You wouldn't think they are like the cooking utensils, but there are certain spaghetti noodles and pasta makers that are actually patent. Logos. Those are like words that are said or a symbol that you relate just to that product. And trademarks. And we're going to discuss that in a minute. So copyright versus trademark. Copyright. Legal protection creators have over things they create. It protects the intellectual ownership. Intellectual ownership means the brains behind it. To make it easier, it's what you have created with your own brain, and someone else can't come along and say, hey, I thought of this. This is mine. Nope, it protects your thoughts. It protects what you have put out there when you copyright it. Trademark. I just mentioned that a little bit ago. It's a word, a phrase, a symbol, or a design that makes that source stand out, such as McDonald's sign or the Nike sign. And there are catchphrases that make you remember a certain product. For example, Just Do It with Nike. That was really big in the 80s and 90s. And there are other words and symbols that just really stand out. Now, the sound recordings, those can actually be copyrighted. Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams came out with Blurred Lines, and they took some of that music from Marvin Gaye's song and put it into their song, and it went into a huge lawsuit. Another great example is Queen. The group Queen sued Vanilla Ice, late 80s, early 90s, over his song Ice Ice Baby because it had a riff in it that was pretty much lifted off the Queen song. And so he got in a lot of trouble. Songs are copyrighted. Audio visual, video games, those are video games are like Atari, the old world stuff, Atari versus Amusement World, like Asteroids and Meteors. That was actually a lawsuit between the two. Asteroids was first, then Meteors came along. So even video games can be copyrighted. Musicals. If you decide to put on a musical of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, The Lion King, Phantom of the Opera, you actually have to go and pay a fee to put on that musical. It is copyrighted. You can't just say, hey, I think I'm going to do The Lion King and go do it. Nope, you have to pay for it. Literary works. Those are books, anywhere from Ender's Game, Maze Runner, to classics, To Kill a Mockingbird. You can't just take a page, a paragraph, or a chapter out of the book and claim it as your own. You have to tell people where you got that from, or you're going to be in huge trouble. Copyright infringement can cost anywhere between $750 to $30,000, and you could spend up to 5 years in prison. So you need to know this when you're saying why. Well, you wouldn't want someone to come along and go, if you and steal your work. You wouldn't want them to take a song that you wrote down on your notebook, and as they're walking by because you're having coffee at Starbucks, and take a picture of it and then try to claim it as their own. You wouldn't want that. You would want the credit for that. So it's very, very important, one, for you to be protected, and two, to give credit when you are borrowing something. Now, a license. A license, it said the definition is simple: a clear way to define the copyright of creative work so others know how they can use it. You have to purchase a license. So, as I mentioned earlier with musicals, that's where you go in and purchase the license. You're paying a fee to use that musical. Anytime you're watching a movie and you watch one of the Marvel movies or Guardians of the Galaxy and you're hearing those fantastic songs, they've had to pay a license to play those songs. They are not playing them for free. They are paying the artist. So every song you hear in a movie, every song you hear on a commercial, they've had to pay a license to play it. Companies and sport logos. Anytime you see it in a movie or a commercial, they're paying a fee. They're paying a license. That's why so many shows, especially reality shows, they'll have a hat on and it's blurred, or their shirts are blurred. It's because they haven't paid that license to show that logo. Software can even have a license. Same thing, and software and technology very closely related. Apple and Microsoft got in a little bit of a tiff because Microsoft wanted Apple to share some of their stuff. So Apple sued Microsoft and said no, but it actually came back and bit them. So software and technology, you have to pay a license. Every time you're using Word, your parents or the school district paid a license for us to use Word. So when you're thinking about that, as you write a paper, think about that. Word has a license. PowerPoint has a license. Adobe, that is software. There is a license fee involved in that. Did you know attribute? Attribute's a real fancy word, but to break it down, you're giving credit to the person who created something. You're listing the author's name, the date, or the citation, and that's where citation comes in. So when you are using someone else's work, make sure you cite it. You want to give proper credit. You don't want people to think you stole something, because then they tend to look down at you and they think you're not an honest person sometimes. Make sure, and it could be purely by accident. You could have just forgotten, and that happens. But when in doubt, go ask a teacher, go ask the librarian or have your parent help you. If you think you can only change one word or change the logo or the symbol by just a little teeny tiny bit, that won't work. You will have to change it up quite a bit because there have been lawsuits on similarities, on logos and symbols looking just a little bit alike. So don't change it a little. Come up with your own or give credit to that company or to that person. Plagiarism is the use of someone's creative work without attribution. It's usually based on words in literary works. It's turning in someone else's work as your own. So if you've got your best buddy and your best buddy's the writer while you're the mathematician and you're turning in a story they wrote for you, that is plagiarism. If you are copying large pieces of work without citing that source, for example, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and you've decided to copy a page out of it, whether it's the cartoon or the written words, but you didn't cite it and you're trying to pass it off as your own, that is plagiarism. If you're taking passages from different sources, and it doesn't matter where it is, it doesn't matter if it's a journal, a newspaper, a gaming magazine, anywhere, and you pass it off as your own, that is plagiarism. Fair use. Now, this changes things up a little bit. This is when a person uses a small portion of a copyrighted work when used in teaching. So if you're using a teeny tiny piece, like I do sometimes, I use a teeny tiny piece, but I always give credit to that person. And I tell you it's copyrighted, and I'm not going to try to resell it as my original work. That's okay. But it has to be for a very small portion, and I cannot pass it off as my own, nor can you pass it off as your intellectual property. It is not our intellectual property. It is someone else's. So why is it important to cite your information? Well, you need to give credit. You want to always give credit of other people's work, because if you're writing a really great paper and someone's reading it and they're going, ooh, I like this bit, I want to know more about it, it will actually help them to find more resources. It also lets the teacher know you did your research, and it makes your point stronger. Now, what exactly is copyrighted? It's anything online. It can be paper, it can be music, it can be video. We've talked about it being technology. We've talked about it being software. It can be so much more. If it's on the internet, it does not mean it's free. So never just think you can take a picture off the internet and put it in your paper. You need to search out the source. If you're struggling with it, go to your teacher, go to your librarian. Now, how can we identify these sources? Real quickly, if it's a book, you need to make sure you have your title, your author, your publisher, and your date. If it's the internet, make sure you've got your creator, your title, your date, and your URL. That's what you need to put in there when you are citing information that is copyrighted. Very, very important. The terms and definitions. We've already gone over this, but let's take one more look before we close out the time. Remember, intellectual property is the legal protection creators have created over things they create. Attribute, to give credit to the person who created something, such as listing the author's name and date or citation. Copyright, it's defining the copyrights, the creative work, so others know how it can be used. A license is ownership of something you've created, and it lets people know how they can use it and for how long. And plagiarism, it's use of someone's creative work without attribution. I hope you've enjoyed your lesson, and I will see you guys later. Thank you.